Hello, my name is Trey, and I'm a professor of Old Testament and Ancient Near Eastern Studies here at Gordon-Conwell. Before God called me to seminary, I lived overseas for a few years in a few different places involved with nonprofit work in poverty alleviation. And for one 4-month stint, I lived in a rural village in Cambodia where I was the only native English speaker. My entire team of teammates, as well as the farmers with which we were trying to work, were all Cambodian. And to work and to serve effectively in that kind of context, one has to develop a cross-cultural perspective. One of the courses I teach here at Gordon-Conwell is called Exploring the Old Testament. We dive deep into the genres, the big picture, the theological themes of the Old Testament. But I think one of the major hurdles that many people feel to understanding, loving, and in fact teaching as a pastor the Old Testament is that in many ways the cultural assumptions, history, geographical context of the Old Testament can feel very alien and very remote. Anytime we translate ancient texts or encounter the lives of those who lived thousands of years before us, as we do in the Old Testament, we are engaging in a cross-cultural act. But when we learn to understand and to appreciate the historical context and the cultural assumptions and the literary backgrounds of the Old Testament, it can greatly open our eyes to how the text works and can speak to us today. I'll give one brief example from the course Exploring the Old Testament, relating to the call of Abraham. Sandra Richter, in her book, The Epic of Eden, identifies what she calls the 3 P's of understanding how people in the Near East sort of found their identity and their sense of belonging. The 3 P's. The first is patriarchal, patrilineal, and patrilocal. So again, these 3 P's she identifies are patriarchal, patrilineal, and patrilocal. Patriarchal just means that everyone found themselves embedded in a social context in which one's family was headed up by the eldest male member, the patriarch, and one's identity and sense of belonging were really rooted in that. Patrilineal means that one's identity was not only in the immediate family, but also connected to one's ancestors in the past, as well as the potential of one's lineage moving forward. And then finally, patrilocal means that the family lives together and stays together. And for someone like Abraham and his father Terah, who were semi-nomadic peoples, this meant that they had an identifiable range. They traveled with their herds up and down this range, always together, always as a family. But in Genesis 12, when God calls Abram, he calls him very explicitly to leave behind his country, his people, and his father's household. Which is to say, what God is asking of Abraham is to abandon all 3 of these marks of identity that Sandra Richter has identified. He is to leave behind his patriarch, Terah, who is still alive at this point. He abandons his traditional range to go to a land to which he's never been. And, at least at this point in Genesis 12, he's to do so with no promise yet that he will have an heir. So God calls Abram to leave behind all of the things that give him a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and a sense of purpose. And Abram, in faith, responds. I hope you'll consider joining me as we explore the Old Testament greater in the course. For more information, you can go to gcts.edu/seminary snippets.